All right, in this video, I want to discuss how to look up the number of rivets that's required for a patch. All right, and I'm going to show you how to use the table 410 in AC 4313. So basically, the table is going to show you the number of rivets required for a lap joint. And I want you to remember that. So if you have a piece of metal that goes that way, another piece of metal that overlaps it, that's known as a lap joint. We learned that in welding. In order to make that one continuous piece of metal, we can also rivet it. So in the overlapping section, you drive a rivet there, there, there. Say you drive 4 rivets. The table will tell you exactly how many rivets of a particular size you need in order to maintain the strength of the metal. If I pulled apart on both sides, in order to maintain the same strength as whatever thickness that metal was. That's what the table is going to show us. All right? And it's going to give us the answer per inch of width in the lap joint. It's 1 inch, it'll give us the number in the table. If it's 2 inches, we got to double it, etc. So let me show you the table now. So this is table 410 out of the 4313. And it has along the top the rivet sizes. So it starts with 3/32, an eighth, 5/32, which is an 85, 3/16, which is an 86. Then it jumps to a quarter, and it also includes bolts. Along the left-hand side, it has the thickness of the metal. And so it's all the way up from a real thin sheet to like 0.128, which is very thick metal. 32 is what we're typically using. But let's say I had a 1-inch lap joint of 2024 T3 Outclad. Table 410 works out for me. I look up 032 and I decide that I want to use AD4 rivets. I come across and I have to have 4.9 rivets per inch of width. So 1 inch, I have to use 5 rivets. If I was going to use AD3s, which are 3/32, I would need 8.9, or in effect, round up to 9. That's how you use that table. It's pretty simple. So it says is if I got a piece of metal that is 1 inch wide, overlap another piece of metal that is 1 inch wide. If I wanted to use AD4 rivets, I'd put 5 rivets in there and I'd be good to go. I'd have that strength restored. Those are AD4 rivets. I could pull on that thing and it would have just the same strength. But I can come back in here with the same thing, 1 inch wide. And what I do on the second piece of metal here is I choose AD3 rivets. And now I got to put 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rivets will give me the same strength. So I can solve that problem 2 ways, AD4s N83s, and I need a different set of rivets. So it's number of rivets that counts. Number of rivets is what gives you strength. Number of rivets and size of the rivet determines the strength. And that's what the table's for. We'll talk about how to lay the rivets out later in a different video in terms of spacing for edge distance and spacing between rivets. For this video, you just have to remember that it's number of rivets required per inch of width on a lap joint. So let's say my lap joint is 2.5 inches wide. My other piece of metal comes along there. Close the metal if you want. But that overlap section is now 2.5 inches wide. Same 032 metal, and it was 8.9, right? 8.9 per inch. I take the 8.9 times 2.5 inch crack gives me 22.25. So I'm going to round up to 23 rivets. So somehow I got to put 23 rivets in this area, equally spaced out using my spacing rules, which I cover in the other video. And as long as I stay away from the edges and as long as I maintain my spacing rules, when I get 23 inches in there, because it was 8.9 rivets per inch, this is a 2.5 inch lap joint. That's what the table's for. All right. I go back to the table. This same table's in your book. And let's say that I had 091 metal and I wanted to use huge rivets. There's my 091. And I use what, 88s. Those are 1/4 inch rivets. Those are big. I need 3.5 rivets per inch. But I could also use 3.3 bolts per inch, AN3 bolts, which are the the smallest AN bolts you're going to find. And so that's how easy it is to use this table. It's make sure it's the right material, figure out what rivet size, figure out what metal size, and then it's per inch. When we do patches, I want you to remember that it's per inch per side. And that'll make more sense when you talk about a patch. So if there's my patch and there's my crack, switching colors, I'm going to put rivets on one side equal to what the table said times the length of the crack in inches. So I'm going to measure that crack up and down in inches. If it's a 2-inch crack, I got to double everything that it said in that table on the one side. But there's also another side. So I go to the other side, put rivets over there. And the last thing I do is cut out my piece of metal to surround everything, my patch. And what you'll see is the right-hand side is known as a lap joint, and the left-hand side is known as a lap joint on either side of the crack, because I'm treating the crack as if all this stuff on the left is one chunk of metal now because it's cracked, and all this stuff on the right is a separate chunk of metal, again, because it's cracked. So instead of having a separate table, you look up in that same table, which applies for lap joints. So what you never want to forget is that table is per inch of lap joint, and it's per side as well when you do a patch. That's how you use table 410. And if you have any questions, we can discuss them.